Okay, so hello and official welcome to everybody to class number 6 on mindfulness and emotional intelligence. It has been quite a ride so far. We've gone over a wealth of different meditative procedures for working with this mind-body experience that's subject to emotions. Again, life in and of itself can be quite triggering on its own. We go back to the first noble truth of, dukkha arya satcha. Simply put, dukkha, noble truth, the noble truth of suffering. This is something that is ever present. Maybe suffering might be too strong a word, so discontent. There's some degree of discontent that makes itself manifest to us, whether it's something rather subtle, something slightly under the radar that gives us a sense that this is a less than perfect moment. And sometimes it surfaces to a degree of disappointment, discontent, distress, and then like higher degrees of suffering. So the way that we normally experience that is, with the emotions that come up that can be rather intense. So much of the aims of this practice is to try to make sense in the moment and make sense not by figuring it out and trying to understand it intellectually, but really how about making our awareness rest in the sense, resting in the senses. So when we're able to rest in the sense gates, then it begins to become a game changer in terms of being able to cultivate certain skill sets of self-regulation, affect tolerance, meta-awareness. So again, it was the final class. I've been putting all of these up on YouTube. Let's see, I'm a little late with last week's not up there yet. So feel free to go to YouTube page, go to YouTube, Michael Zittel Dharma. And I have a lot of recordings of the morning meditation sit group, as well as the classes that I do here on Wednesday nights. But let's go to the Blackboard for a moment here. Okay, just want to make sure that we are. Okay, let's go. Here we are. So this is where we should be. Okay, so hopefully everybody is able to check this out. Everybody is able to see this here. So let's review a bit of what we've been looking at thus far. So the overview. Class number 1, we were looking at, the shamatha. How is it that we can cultivate the calm abiding by leaning into the certain restful, gladdening and balancing qualities of the breath. So there's that 4 quadrants of the breath that we were using in order to discern restful qualities. And comparing that into going into the noting feeling states exercise, where we are allowing our attention to rest into the body and moment by moment contact and label the different emotions as they arise in the body. And so there's this analogy of playing tag, where there's the being on base, you can rest, you can resource. So that'd be more of the shamatha practice, cultivating that calm abiding, versus going into the emotions and being able to contact, feel them through. Yeah, so that's more of the going out into the game and playing tag. That's the exploration, the contact, the kind of leaning into the experience. So we were working with those skill sets in the first class. The second class, we were working with the analogy of, or the acronym CLEAR. And we're having clear focus with respect to the noting feeling states. That is to say, okay, great, I'm feeling something in the body. This is anger, fear, sadness, joy, love, humor. Now what? Well, how is it that we can learn to be with the experience? How is it that we can contact that sensation? And then label it, give it a name. Can we discern? This is the discerning qualities of mindfulness that we're building. Can we explore? What's the location, the size, the shape, the boundaries that this sensation is taking up? All the while, can we imbue it with a sense of acceptance or equanimity, that capacity to feel through? And of course, we relinquish. We're not fixating on our emotive experience, and we're not fueling it. And especially we're not going into the thoughts, the fantasy planning daydream around the emotion and fueling those thoughts. But how is it that we can be with it and kind of let go what needs to be let go of so you can enter into the next moment afresh? And what we might find is each moment we're just kind of updating what our sensory experience is. We can begin to notice there's potentially some impermanence, some flow that takes place. That's class number 3. We're working with maps of the practice. And so we're really getting to the mindfulness here, or in particular, kind of the insight component. When we progress along insight, we're able to have an experience where we're moving beyond the conceptual. Oh, this is what happened, and I'm thinking this, and this is what's giving me this emotion, but I'm really, truly lost in concepts of it. Moving from the concepts into the sensory experience. Being with the senses, being with the experience in the body. And then we can begin to notice, discern the impermanence that happens. This rises, comes into being, passes away from being. Go back to the analogy of the smile. The smile is something that comes into being, flourishes, passes away from being. We don't hold on to it. We don't grasp onto it. It's in a state of flow. How is it that we can also have that ability to relate to our experience of emotions so that the anger, fear, sadness, hopelessness, disgust can also have that same rise and fall fluidity as the smile, so to speak. So we can do that, and then the more that we're able to kind of let go, then we can be able to kind of, well, rest in just a simple awareness. Have our attention just rest in awareness, non-identifying with anything. So that's where we began to work with in the meditation practice, working with flow states, the local, global, full body, with the various themes. Class 4 then, we put that to practice, deconstructing negative ego states. We started to go a little bit more into the Vipassana, looking at these subcomponents of self. We're bringing up a charged experience and then breaking it apart into the subcomponents. But part of that is the memory that you see internally, talk you hear, the feeling that is going on in the body, and then allowing that to move to impermanence. So we're kind of deconstructing the negative ego state, and then class 5, doing the opposite, cultivating the positive ego states. So we were kind of leaning into that Vajrayana kind of deity yoga practice in a way, but rather than emerging with some archetype, it was we were accessing a memory or an event or an experience where we were able to feel, the nervous system was able to feel some characteristic trait, quality that we would like to cultivate more of. So then we're moving into the house that we can cultivate, sustain, enter into and abide in. So it's this kind of metta vipassana state. Vipassana in the sense that we're still working with the subcomponents of self, see, hear, and feel. But rather than auguring into and disidentifying, it was more of the metta in terms of we were leaning into cultivating a certain altruistic state. So this is where I would like to piggyback onto today, working with metta, just really leaning into the metta practice. A lot of us come from various backgrounds, various degrees of practice. So for some people here, they may be rather familiar with metta. They may be rather, they might consider it to be an integral part of their meditation practice. For many people, it's their favorite practice just because of the positive feel-good aspect of it. And for some, it might be a little bit of a newer concept. So I'm just going to go with that. Just kind of give the intro to a traditional metta in a way. So Metta practice. Metta is considered one of the four abodes, the Brahma Viharas. Yes, the four limitless abodes. So they are kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. Kindness being a metta piece, and which is essentially how is it that we can be open. Sometimes it's translated as goodwill. A lot of people use the phrase loving kindness because there's that kindness. It's that loving quality kind of bridges that gap. These are all ways that kind of help us connect, build intimacy with ourselves, others. We can cultivate these qualities. There's the general kindness. And then, of course, there's the compassion, compassio, being able to open up, open towards, and be able to feel through or feel with the pain of. So sometimes it's having compassion for others, what's my capacity to sit with somebody as they're experiencing pain and I can be with them, not in a place of pity where I'm looking down on them. Hey, I'm fine. I got my stuff together. You don't, I'm not from that place, but, so that we're equal, peer to peer, but I'm still able to feel that with them. And then sometimes it's more of a self-directed compassion. That's that analogy of the mother holding the baby. That's something that I reflected on with some frequency over the course of the series. As we're aware of the pain and emotive pain, and we can become clear about the boundaries of its location, can our awareness hold that? Outside of that boundary, is there what? Is there neutrality, relief? Is there some access to a deeper resource? And can that awareness hold that pain in the way that the mother would hold the baby, so we can direct that compassion? These are ways of we are learning to cultivate a deeper sense of a self-directed compassion. So compassion can be, any of these can be directed towards others or towards self. Then mudita, the appreciative joy, being able to open up toward the good, rather than having envy for others in their successes. Can we share in the joy of others? The joys that other peoples are having, can that also elicit a sympathetic joy? And also, if it's a self-directed, if there's something pleasant opening up in our experience, can we as well appreciate that, allow ourselves to feel the good within that too? So there is something about that helping the positive affect tolerance. Of course, equanimity, upekkha, the full acceptance, the ability to be with, sense of kind of coolness, and non-preference of the pleasant or the unpleasant. So that we can just be with our experience, be it pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. So that's kind of the general terms of those four aspects of the Brahma Viharas. So they're the remedy. They're the remedy to what ails us. Yeah. So the anger, fear, sadness that comes up for us, it's possible to meet that with these responses of kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. And as well, these are ways in which we can respond to the world. It increases our capacity for well-being in any mental state that we have. Now, then one of the interesting stories of around metta in the suttas is apparently there was a time during the rains retreat, during the rains retreats in early Buddhism, still to today, but the custom was back in the day of the Buddha, throughout all the different expressions and practices of different wisdom traditions. During the rain seasons, holy people would just not travel. Sometimes they would talk about, the worms that would come up. They didn't want to kill insects or worms or kill things. But also, I think there was some practicality in the fact that travel was just hard. So during those 3 months of rains retreat, the monks would choose a place to stay and just kind of post up there. And it would be considered a time of intensified practice. So as the story goes, there was a group of monks that decided to take up residence in a particular set of woods. And these woods were also inhabited by some sort of tree sprites or some supernatural forces of some deities there. And at first, apparently, as the story goes, these woodland deities were like, "Oh, this is great. We're hanging out in the spirit world, but we got these monks here. Very auspicious. Great. Let's greet them like hosts. Let's be good hosts and greet our guests well." But after 3 days, like fish, they started to stink, and they're just like, "Oh man, these monks, they just will not leave." So there's a story that goes that the monks started to the spirits started to haunt them. So let's move to that page there. All right, are you seeing this? Okay, so this is a section from that story here. So, then they thought to themselves, the spirits, they said to themselves, I just want to be able to move that. These bars, there we go. Then they thought to themselves, it is doubtless the intentions of the monks to remain right here for the 3 months, but if they do remain here, it would be improper for us to take son and wife, climb trees, and live here for 3 months. Moreover, it will greatly weary us to sit on the ground. By what means can we best drive these monks away? Accordingly, in the night quarters, in the day quarters, and at the ends of the cloisters, the spirits caused the monks to see bodiless heads and headless trunks, and to hear the voices of demons. At the same time, the monks were afflicted with sneezing and coughing and suffered from many other ailments besides. They said to each other, "Brother, what ails you? I am afflicted with sneezing. I am afflicted with coughing. Brethren, today, at the end of the cloister, I saw a bodiless head. Brethren, in the night quarters, I saw a headless trunk," and so on. So as the story goes, they all ran out of the woods, quite scared, and they sought out the Buddha, and they're like, "Buddha, help us out here. We're just kind of doing our thing. We're meditating and doing alms rounds, and we're trying to be generally well-behaved monastics, but these ghosts are really freaking us out." So the Buddha, interestingly enough, said, "Well, you guys got to go back to the woods." And they said, "We cannot do so, Reverend Sir." And then he says, "Monks, when you're there for the first time, you went without a weapon. Now you must take a weapon with you when you go." "What kind of weapon, Reverend Sir?" Said the teacher, "I will give you a weapon, and that weapon I give you to take with you when you go." Then he recited the entire Metta Sutta, beginning as follows. Thus must one do who is skilled to seek their own spiritual good. Once they have attained the region of tranquility, they must be honest, upright, meek and mild, and free from vaingloriousness. Having recited the sutta, he said, "Monks, recite the sutta from the forest grove without the hermitage, and then you may enter within the hermitage." With this instruction, he dismissed them. So what happened was apparently the monks went back and they recited the Metta Sutta with frequency each day. And apparently what that did is that just calmed the spirits, and the spirits went down, sat with them, and participated with them. And it generally speaks to, I guess, two things. It's this bidirectional practice, yeah? So who were they doing it for? Who are they practicing the metta for? It says in the sutta, or it says in the story, that as they were doing so, it calmed and appeased the spirits. So they became filled with friendliness, and they wanted to connect with them. So by that, having that metta, there's this way in which there's a service to others. It's something, it moves out and heals that interpersonal space. But likewise, the monks themselves, they were freaked out. They were overwhelmed. They were all hallucinating bodiless heads and headless bodies. So the metta is something that was doing something for them, calming down their rather destabilized states, calming down that anxiety. So the metta practice is something that we can do for ourselves and for others. Now then, definitively, if I practice metta, is that going to affect that person over there? I don't know. Can I close my eyes and just have some experience, and it's actually going to affect some people? I don't know if there's any definitive studies out there that really can show beyond a shadow of a doubt that that happens. But the more that I'm able to work through the shame, fear, anger, jealousy, resentment, what have you, that I carry in my heart, it sure is going to show up in how I present when I'm around that other person. It's definitely going to decrease my own defensiveness. It's going to decrease my own whatever muck I'm bringing into that space. And it's going to increase my capacity to have warmth, if that's appropriate. Or maybe it's just going to increase my capacity to have patience as I still hold a boundary, if that's what's more present. So in either way, that's something that can be felt, definitely, in the interpersonal space. So this metta practice is something that is to bring kind of like a soothing balm to our own experience of self, as well as to others. Yeah. So, and going back to the board here. So, revisiting these 4 abodes, a practical application. So, I like to say sometimes how quickly, if we were able to just be left to our own devices, how long does it take for us to just kind of sit down and just work in our imagination, and we work ourselves into a lather of anger, fear, and sadness, dismay, what have you? Probably not that long for the majority of us. We could probably sit down and think of all the things that are bothersome, overwhelming, disappointing, especially going on right now these days. And we can feel that and get caught, work ourselves up. With that same short amount of time, can we actually allow ourselves to cultivate a state of a pleasant abiding? Sadly, unfortunately, for most of us, no. It's easy to be worked up. It's easy to get ourselves freaked out, bummed out, and overwhelmed. It's difficult to get ourselves into a place of kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, equanimity. So this is part of the solve, the salve as well as the solve of equanimity. Can we just hang out with this place of metta, of kindness? Just access that intention to some degree. So in early Buddhism, they really emphasize the metta piece as the shorthand or the entering into the practice. That's why they call it the Metta Practice. We're cultivating kindness. In later Mahayana traditions, or really in the Vajrayana traditions, the equanimity, Upekkha, the equanimity, is more of the entering into. So I like to play it both ways. Whatever's more accessible to you. Can we allow ourselves to just access that kindness inside, or can we access that equanimity, or that just acceptance? The pleasant, the unpleasant, the neutral. We can just kind of accept. To whatever degree that we can have that there, then, well, there's this pliancy, there's this flexibility. If I can just hang out in a pleasant abiding, well, what would stop it? Something happens to push us off. So we can abide, we can try to, or we can cultivate a practice where we can attempt to abide in a kindness and equanimity, and regardless of what comes up. So if something pleasant comes up, a pleasant thought, fantasy, idea comes up, well, the risk of having a little too much pleasant is that it will turn into a sense of craving. These are the hot months, and my wife just texted me earlier. She's like, hey, I'm coming back from an errand and I'm stopping by Baskin Robbins. What flavor do you want? Oh no, it just kind of broke my whole sweet tooth sugar ice cream craving. Part of me is just like, maybe it's good not to go there, because once I open that ice cream train, then there we go. I'm just going to be full of craving. So that's something that happens. What happens to us? What is it for you when that pleasant thing comes up? Oh, and there becomes a potential unskillful grasping around that turns into a craving. And then we're trying to hang out in this kindness, but then something unpleasant comes up. A particular idea that creates a little anxiety, a little fear, a little trepidation, a little frustration. Oh, I don't like that. The problem of that unpleasantness arising is that it could potentially turn into aversion. And then that aversive quality, the defending, the hating, the pushing away, that kind of struggle that happens. And likewise, well, what happens if neutral shows up? Neutral shows up. That's the majority of our day, is these neutral experiences that we've done thousands of times before and we'll do 1,000 times again. That's the risk of, these are the places where we go unconscious. We space out, we dissociate, we fall into fantasy planning, daydream, and our mindfulness goes. So this is the way that I like to play with the metta practice is, well, all right, I'm going to get rid of me here for a second. Unfortunately, this kind of takes up the whole space here. But if we can see here, there's this kindness, the metta. Down here we have the equanimity. Now then, here we have the unpleasant, this minus side here, without awareness of it. When the unpleasantness comes in, if we're not aware of it, then it could potentially turn into aversion. But if we can cultivate the sense of kindness and or equanimity, and open up and turn towards that unpleasant experience, the particular pain of the body, pain of the heart, pain of the mind, that act of opening up and turning towards the unpleasantness of our experience, that's the compassion. It's just the kindness plus unpleasant. We're able to feel that through with this kindness, this goodwill, this qualities of love, acceptance. Similarly, or conversely, if we're having this pleasantness arise, I'm hanging out in kindness, I'm hanging out in equanimity, acceptance, things are cool. And then all of a sudden, wow, something feels really good, or something seems like it would feel really good. Well, if we're unmindful, that could turn into a craving. And all of the frustrated, wanting, jonesing for that can happen. But if we can allow ourselves to have the skillful, wholesome, allowing ourselves to derive a sense of contentment and appreciative joy of that pleasantness, then it turns into that mudita. So this is a way in which we can cultivate this kindness, cultivate this equanimity, and then keep that going regardless as to what the next experience holds for us, be it pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. So what is present for you right now? What is present for you these days, for yourself? These are the COVID times. What have you lost so far this year because of the virus and all of the things that have happened, that have rolled out? I was reading so many stories of people, weddings, graduations, jobs that have fell through, companies that have closed down, many people living in the social isolation, the economic insecurity, the potential, what is that there? Yeah, the potential increase of anxiety. So there are these factors that we're just living with each day. Where I live right here in the northern part of the San Fernando Valley, it's fire season. So we've had a couple close calls already where we've had to pack our bags and put things by the door, and then it's like that. Yeah, that rolls by. We're safe, but still, tons of fires going on all over there. We can see it in the skies. We can smell it, and that has raised like the baseline anxiety in our household. Can we be aware of what's the unpleasant that's coming in right now? These are the things that we have to deal with. In the interpersonal, what's your situation? So many of us social distancing, staying at home so much. How's that going? Are we liking the people that we're staying home with? Is there that cabin fever that's happening? Or maybe for a lot of us, we're isolated alone. Do we like the person that we are sheltering in place with as we're alone? So these are some experiences that are happening where there's the intrapersonal, the me experiencing myself, my own anxiety. There's the interpersonal, where We're rubbing up against other people. How is that going? Then there's this social net there we're in right now. DNC is having its thing going on. The elections are ramping up. The partisan conflict is just, ever disappointing. So all of that is ramping up. So the politicization, the polarization of the country is just, at all-time highs right now. We've got the police aggression, Black Lives Matter protesting going on. I mean, just down the street from me for the last months, there's just a regular section of the street where it's just like, you got on one side, we have like all these people that are trying to, support the police, but they're showing up with like all their pro-Trump banners, and there's the occasional swastika that shows up in the group. And then on the other side, Black Lives Matter counter protesters to that, and it's just ripe with tension going. It's just a lot of pain that's coming up right now that we are all experiencing, and some of us more directly than others, for sure. So we're feeling this erosion in the communities. So isn't it a good time to have a practice that helps with what's going on in our own heart, and that helps how we can show up in that interpersonal space where there can be potential for tension? How is it that we can drop some of our guards, drop some of our defensiveness, or drop some of our resentment, or more specifically, drop the suffering around this? Maybe it's appropriate to, in the case of like protesting against injustice in the world, it's appropriate to get up and get out there and engage. But how can you do it where you're not overwhelmed with your own rage and anxiety? How can you do that with your feet centered and the suffering component taken out so that you're clear? So this takes us to the traditional metta practice. This is what we're going to be working with today. So the traditional metta practice is one by one, we're just taking on different objects, different individuals. Can we send that sense of metta, that kindness towards them? Be they pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So in a way, we start off by cultivating some metta, cultivating the kindness, equanimity. And then it's like we're doing reps with weights, and every once in a while, we just add a few more plates so it's a little heavier. So we're doing that training. So yeah, that's what I want to get into for tonight's practice. We've done quite a bit in looking at our own emotional experiences and being able to deconstruct the negative. And then last week, we're looking at building positive, specific ego states. But I really want to start to begin to just really lean and focus in on just the quality of metta itself. So we'll do a guided, rather traditional metta practice this evening. But before we get into the actual sitting practice, does anybody have any questions or comments that they would like to reflect on before we jump into things? All right, let's do it. Allow yourself to come to an upright seated posture. Allow yourself to straighten up and settle in. I'm going to be cultivating metta this evening. But we'll start off with a few minutes of shamatha, cultivating the calm abiding. Allowing yourself to just rest your attention on the breath. However it is that you contact it in the body, just place your attention here. From the beginning, what is the attitude that we're having towards the breath, towards sitting, towards this moment? Is there a restlessness, an aversion, what have you? Allow the breath to contact that, bring a sense of ease. How are we responding to the moment? Can we, from the beginning, begin to lean into a sense of kindness? A sense of goodwill, loving kindness, whatever feels appropriate for you. And overall, just have this underlying current of equanimity, acceptance of how things are in this moment for you, be they pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So allowing yourself to notice the pleasant, gladdening, and balancing effects of the breath. So right here, we can start off with playing around with that metta response to stimuli. Anything that's pleasant, that's arising in the breath, can we meet that with that appreciative joy? That is to say, allow yourself to feel the pleasant qualities there. Take that in. Give yourself permission to feel that, to appreciate that, to have a sense of contentment. It's opening up, turning towards, meeting with the kindness, acceptance, and feeling through. Very good. So again, knowing that breath is always there, always available. Return to breath at any time, or have breath be a part of this experience as we move more into Metta Practice. You can start off. Let's start off with a loved one. So bring to mind an individual, loved one, a family member, a friend, teacher, mentor, benefactor, a pet, an animal, any someone. And when they arise in your awareness, it's followed by feelings of affinity, kindness, loving kindness, goodwill. In other parlance, bring this loved one into C space of the mind. Partial awareness in the feeling centers of the body, permitting, allowing any of the loving kindness qualities to arise. Be aware of how and where do they arise in the body. So for some, we can have this image that can help elicit, create these loving qualities. Maybe for others, an image doesn't work so much, so maybe metta phrases are more helpful. A traditional one, may you be free from harm, may you be free from suffering, may you know happiness, may you know peace. Very traditional one you can just put on repeat and between the ears, play it as a mantra. Or if there's any other phrase that inclines you to get in contact with, cultivate qualities of kindness, allow yourself to do so. So the main thing here is allow the nervous system to feel a general sense of kindness, openness. If you'd like to switch out individuals in the mind, it's perfectly fine to do so. But the main goal is ultimately to be cultivating this flavor, this set of flavors in the heart. To whatever degree the metta is present, permit, allow yourself to appreciate that, appreciate those qualities, the pleasant qualities. Good. So now we're letting go of the loved one. Let's bring up neutral. Neutral individual who, this is somebody when they arise in your mind, who doesn't necessarily elicit an attraction or a repulsion, a feeling of kindness towards or a feeling of aversion against. They're somewhat neutral. This can be one individual, or you can go through a Rolodex of neutral individuals, neighbors you may see walking around that you don't know, people in the workplace that you might not connect with or be familiar with, whoever it is for you. Now then, rather than allowing your metta to flatline, can we also take into consideration this individual, the person? They too are experiencing their own troubles and strife. They too are deserving to be free from harm, free from suffering. May they know happiness, may they know peace. This is where we are intending, intending to generate this metta toward somebody that might, normally it might not inspire it of you. Good. You can say goodbye to the neutral person. Stacking a few more plates of weight on the barbell here. Bring to mind a challenge individual. That is to say, this is not the worst human being in your life that you know personally or just aware of out in the news cycle. Just maybe somebody that's a little bit more in the mildly frustrating end. The person, when they arise in your awareness, there is generally not a feeling of kindness towards. You still cultivate a sense of metta directed towards. On one hand, that can be the expression of maybe calling to mind that some of their unskillful behavior may be a result of their own suffering that they're going through. In which case, may they be free from harm, free from suffering. Maybe for others, it's not necessarily sending that metta to them, but can you recognize your own pain that arises and send that compassion, that own pain that arises within you? So maybe when that person arises, there's less anger or enmity. As we can soothe or send some kindness towards our own experience of pain that arises when we're aware of it. So sometimes the metta can be directed towards the other, sometimes it can be directed towards yourself in this. Good. So we can let go. Say goodbye to the challenge individual. Let go of them. And just come back to replenishing this experience of metta, kindness that may be available. Qualities of equanimity or acceptance that may be available. Anything pleasant that arises, can we meet that with this appreciative joy, this willingness to open up, turn towards, like that kindness, acceptance towards the pleasant, feeling that through. And anything unpleasant that arises, turning this kindness, acceptance towards that, getting this compassion, feeling that through. So there can be this flexibility, this pliancy, this metta state as the terrain of our sensory experience constantly shifts between the pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. How we respond can continue to build this momentum of metta. This other approach within the suttas, Buddha talks about a radial metta. Enter into and abide in this space. Like a flame that is indiscriminate in sending its light in all directions. Can we offer up this metta outward into space to all beings? We can be aware of this particular group right here in front of us that's joining together in this space virtually. We're all generating metta. Can we offer that to each other? Can we offer it off around us to the neighbors, those that we like, don't like, or neutral towards? And we go further beyond that, all directions. So we focus on sending this metta outward into space to all beings in front of us, limitlessly. This metta can move outward into space limitlessly towards the right, offering up this metta outwards into space to what's behind us. Offering this metta outwards into space to the left. Cultivating, offering this metta outward into space above and below. Again, the image of the flame, the lantern, the light, shining in all directions. And this metta be offered boundlessly, limitlessly in all directions. So to realize this metta is being offered in all directions. There are others practicing metta now in other parts of the world, and also in the past and in the future. We offer this metta outwards to all beings. Can you recognize that you are one of those, quote, of all beings? And allow yourself to receive this metta that's being generated at you. As this metta comes to you from left, right, front, behind, above, and below, it enters into you, fills up your heart, fills up your being. So whatever pleasant qualities of the metta, opening up, turning towards, creating this positive feedback loop. Feel the pleasant aspect of it. Allow yourself to enjoy that. That creates another pleasant moment. The appreciative joy is there. That appreciative joy quality can go on a loop, further deepening and abiding. Whatever's unpleasant about your experience, can you open up, turn towards that with this capacity for kindness and equanimity? It gives you a resiliency, and ability to feel through without cultivating aversion. So whatever qualities of metta that are showing up now in the body, can you take that as the object of focus? And abide. Sometimes coming into the body, feeling the metta, sometimes exuding it outwards into space, sometimes receiving it. At ease, everybody. Post-bell practice, allowing yourself to not shut off what you've been cultivating, allow yourself to receive that. It's a comparatively slightly more complex activity, engaging in discussion. So if you have any questions or comments, or what did you notice? What did you observe about your experience in meditation?
When it came to the difficult person, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, when it came to the difficult person, I had a hard time because I want to balance out the compassion aspect and also want to leave room for my emotions to process. So it's always been a challenge for me.
Yeah, so you want to have the compassion, but also balance out your emotions. So have the compassion for who? Because at one point it was like, all right, can we have compassion towards the challenge person? Or can we direct that compassion towards our own emotive experience? Were you able to do that part?
Well, I think I wanted to have compassion for those other people, and at the same time wanting like that for me to have the different feelings like anger, frustration, and it's hard to hold both because when in the past I have talked about the compassion piece, then it's harder for me to really sit with those feelings. It's like I can have one, but it's hard for me to have both.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
It's hard to have both. So it's hard to have that compassion for the other person while your own emotions are rather intense. Yeah?
Yes.
So, I mean, what's the need? What's the rush to bringing the compassion towards the other person?
The rush.
Yeah, why not work with your own kind of emotive experience so that it's compassion for yourself, compassion for the part that's hurting within you. And then in time, maybe some of that emotive reactivity might begin to diminish a bit. And if it's appropriate to have compassion towards the other, then there might be a little bit more availability for that.
Well, at times I have issues for self-compassion. Do you have any tips on that? Like how to really expand and have more compassion for self?
I'd have more compassion for self. Well,
because I didn't grow up like that. So
you didn't grow up having.
I didn't grow up having just identifying feelings and sharing feelings. So it's pretty new for me.
Yeah, of course. Some people, I think that it's very common. I think a lot of us struggle with having, any of this metta towards ourselves. And there's so many stories of many teachers just suggesting that we practice metta on ourselves for so long. And I think to your point, I think for a lot of us, that's the most difficult one. So there's different tricks and stuff that I've heard. If there's something that it's difficult to have compassion for you now, this experience, can you bring up an image of yourself as a child? You're more innocent and maybe have compassion towards that end. I think that there's people have like different kind of tricks and ways of doing that. Another aspect of it is compassion for self or compassion for the not self, so to speak. Rather than having compassion for this egoic identity that is hanging out, struggling with whatever it is we're identifying with or as, can we just have more the compassion for that sensate experience? So is it okay if I ask you, Aiden, like, what comes up for you? You said anxiety, fear, sadness. What are the emotions that come up that are challenging?
Anger,
Anger. Okay.
frustration, sadness. But I think it's more on the anger rage side.
Anger, rage. So, yeah. Where do you feel that in the body when that comes up?
Upper body.
Upper body. Okay. Is it more expansive, contractive, solid?
More contracted.
More contracted.
Just feeling like I'm always holding my breath and shallow breathing.
Okay. Are you aware of it now? Is it still present now to some degree?
Yeah, it's present.
Okay. Right. So as though it's invisible, if you're pouring a can of paint on it, that paint kind of drizzles over it and it kind of defines the edges and boundaries. Can you do that with your awareness? Allow your awareness to just kind of pour over it so you really get a sense of its boundaries and such.
Mm.
To whatever degree it reveals itself to you. And as your awareness is kind of holding that space, I mean, can there be some acceptance there? Maybe the kindness might be less available. Maybe the compassion is less available. Can maybe the acceptance, equanimity piece be available? Right now it's like this. I prefer it to be something else, but this is what it is right now. Is that available to any degree?
At times.
At times. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes the compassion piece might be less available, but are any of compassion's three friends potentially available? Probably the appreciative joy might be less available, but the kindness and the acceptance may be there to any degree. And the more that there can be this tolerance that grows in terms of your own ability to have some kindness, acceptance towards this field of space that's arising, that might begin to help you kind of metabolize it a bit, or grow some tolerance, resiliency. In which case, then you can really allow yourself to feel into it, and the compassion starts to really become available.
Mm.
Did any of the noting feeling states, or any of those exercises we were doing a couple of weeks ago, do you feel that addressed that or helped that at all? Assisted in?
Yeah, when I did try it initially, it was really helpful.
Okay.
And I didn't end up doing it every day, but the times, like recently, it's been harder
Mm-hmm.
because I'm spinning different narratives and
Yeah.
trying to really process.
So whatever we can do to take a moment to pause the narrative and just kind of be with it. Because it's the narratives are just fueling the emotions, and it's like the drain is backed up in the tub and it's just filling with water. So whatever we can do to pause the narrative and just come into the sensory experience in the body and just be with that experience, that helps to just kind of drain the water out a little bit. And that takes us back from the edge of overwhelm.
Well, sometimes I'm addicted to the narrative,
Of course.
like watching a movie.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. It's good that you know that, and it's good to take, put this under the microscope and work with all of these different tool sets. Sometimes it's about leaning into the shamatha. How can I take a break and just kind of rest a bit? Sometimes it's about leaning into the vipassana side. How can I, disidentify from this and look at the subcomponents of self? How is this narrative showing up? Is it primarily seeing, hearing, feeling? How are they serving to fuel each other so the narrative perpetuates? And sometimes can you get in touch with that intention of feeding that narrative, and can you kind of pull back on that? And just allow the seeing to be just seeing, hearing to be hearing, come into the body and just work on directing that kindness and equanimity towards whatever's been activated until there becomes some degree of movement, some degree of impermanence. So, like you said, this is rather new work, but over the last weeks, you've definitely been putting in some a good amount of time. It's consistency of time, a consistency of effort over time will begin to move. Does that resonate for you at all?
What's that?
Does that resonate? Does that feel appropriate for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's continue to check on that, okay? Thank you. Anybody else? What did you notice? What did you observe? What was your experience here?
Yeah, just really quick, I guess. Yeah, usually I have pretty good success with the metta practice. It tonight was way more challenging. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, for a few different reasons, external reasons, but yeah, I just noticed kind of my intolerance of it all. It was like, for it was okay for the positive person, the mentor, loved one, that was okay. But even with that one, there's still a lot of like emotional charge. There was an emotional charge between every kind of person that I went into. With the neutral person, I always struggle with that no matter what I do. My brain's just automatically like boring. Just cannot. Just, I mean, come on, there's no preference for or against. I mean, what are we even doing? I get the importance of kind of going into that and being with that. But yeah, it was very dismissive tonight. And then the difficult person was just like really, really difficult. Hence the difficult person. And I did, there's a huge emotional charge. And so at that point, I was at least able to be like, all right, we're taking a step back. And I could sort of be on there's a lot of emotions coming up. And so I could step out, I could sort of step back from that and just be in the body with the emotions. I'm not sure if that's helpful to kind of go out of the strictly metta. Sometimes I get confused about how much I should engage with other things, if I should just stay with the metta flavors, or if I should, if I should just turn, to the appreciative joy or the compassion aspect. But emotions were predominant, and there was a fair amount of equanimity happening as well. I was accepting. I'm like, well, this is what it is. It's fine. And so I could just be with the emotions and step outside of that sort of whirlwind, so to speak. And have a little bit more control there, but still really difficult. More than usual, just a lot of things to work through there. But I was just kind of curious, is it kind of a good thing to go? I mean, like, at what point do you, I don't know, rein in the sort of, I don't know, just the emotions, or engage or disengage? Wasn't quite sure about that.
Well, thank you for that, Nicole. For sure, it's like, you've heard me say, it's always the challenge in doing the guided meditation is everybody's having a uniquely different experience. And so sometimes it's like, well, okay, the instructions are A, but B is happening for me, and I feel like I might need to address this differently. So, I mean, you could, you hear me say, challenge, opportunity, or interest. You could say, all right, well, this is a challenging thing going at it, and I'm going to stick with it, and I'm just going to throw metta at it, whether that's compassion quality, the appreciative joy, the kindness, the equanimity, whatever flavors feel more accessible towards what experience. There's that. But also, if you need to take a pause and lean into other tool sets that are available to kind of rein it in a bit, that's perfectly appropriate. Like, so part of the discussions that we had over the course of this series, the knowing when to bear down and when to lighten up. Can we just kind of bear down into the metta quality into this, or kind of we lighten up in terms of, focusing onto a different strategy? Or can we bear down by, all right, maybe I need to just kind of do some insight work into kind of breaking this down. Sometimes, well, for what you're saying and what you were saying before, Aiden, sometimes it's like the emotions can get so intense that, I feel it's better to go into the vipassana side of things. And particularly like the noting feeling states aspect of it, to begin to kind of process and break the identification and kind of bring that charge down. Then it's like, it's easier to go into the metta. It's like, the analogy of like, you've got a dirty wall, you put a primer coat on it before you put the new color up. Because if you just go straight to the dirty wall to just the new paint, that dirt is going to come through. You need something to kind of like, well, maybe the primer isn't the best example, more of something that scours and kind of washes, cleanses it off. So that the noting feeling states and another Vipassana-esque strategy to deal with the emotive sensations. Maybe you can kind of break the self-identification with it. And then once that begins to lighten up a bit, it might be easier to return back to the metta. So I always found that metta is a lot easier to do after insight practice. And that's me, that's just my preference. But so for you, if it's like, all right, let's jump into metta, but there's so much charge happening, and it's difficult to really get the metta train going, yeah, it's okay. It's okay to press a pause and go into a different strategy. Go into your toolbox and see what is probably most appropriate for what you're experiencing.
Thanks, Mike. I think I need the reminder that, the practice, I'm always so like, I want to stick to the script and, not go rogue. It feels like going rogue, I guess. The practice is going to be what it's going to be ultimately. And, it's nice to kind of have parameters like this is a metta practice. But I mean, if it's just not happening, then to go with that. And so it's a good reminder.
Good. All right. I'd like to do one final share myself here of oops, where is it? So the Buddha earlier was, speaking to the monks, and I just thought I would take a moment to share what it was that he was saying. So right here, this is the Metta Sutta, Niya Metta Sutta, Buddha's words on loving kindness. So this is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble, not conceited, content and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful, calm, wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak, strong, omitting none. The great or the mighty, medium, short, small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects her life, her child, her only child, So with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outward and unbounded, free from hatred and ill will. Whether standing, walking, seated, lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding on to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desire, is not born again into this world. Just thought I would end on that particular note, that we can hopefully take with us. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for sharing on this journey for this particular series. So I want to do the Dana talk here. So for everybody, I'm just going to put up a link. Here we have the donate link. So we've all been going through difficult times here, as I was talking about earlier, and as well, Inside LA has been going through their share of hard times too. So whatever practice of generosity you can have, that would be definitely appreciated. So we can continue to come and bring these teachings to you. The teachings themselves are freely offered. No one is turned away from lack of funds. And I greatly appreciate everybody being able to bring your time and attention here. So just want to say thank you. Also, I wanted to just remind people that if anybody would like to, please join us in our morning meditations. I do a morning meditation that's open to the public, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I'm sorry, 9 to 5, 9 to 10 a.m. We work with a different facet of practice each day. 9 to 5, that would be going into full retreat mode, which will be coming up soon enough. Yeah. But thank you. Actually, the next theme that I think, so this series is now officially done, but do not fret, next Wednesday I'll be here. I will still continue to be here on Wednesdays. I believe I'm going to be piggybacking off of this Metta theme and doing a 4-week series exploring Metta in various expressions and permutations. So yeah, there's that. Okay, everybody. Let's do a dedication of merit. By the merits of these acts and other such virtues may we attain liberation for the benefit of all beings. We bow before those who have come before us on the path, and to those who will come after us on the path. Okay. So thank you, everybody. Just wanted to, for all of you who have been patient with the recordings and such like that, here is the YouTube link. So if you want to go back and to reference, to study any of the stuff that we've done before, these videos will be posted there, as well as other resources, free resources for you to help in your practice. So again, thank you, everybody, and really appreciate you all, and hope to see you all next week.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Virtual
Thank you
ice
so
cream
much.
all
Good
around.
night.